Debt doesn't just drain your bank account. It drains your choices, your peace, and your ability to obey God with your money. Scripture has a complete system for getting out of it permanently. Here are the 7 steps straight from the Bible, and the last one is the one that makes sure you never go back. Most people in debt have a vague sense of how much they owe. They know it's a lot, they know it's uncomfortable, but they don't know the exact number, because the exact number feels too heavy to look at directly. So they live in a fog of approximation, making minimum payments and hoping things somehow improve without ever having to confront the full picture. Scripture calls this out directly. Proverbs 27:23 says, "Be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds." In biblical times, flocks were wealth. Today, your finances are your flock, and you cannot manage what you refuse to measure. The first step to getting out of debt isn't a payment plan. It isn't a budget. It's a list. Every single debt you carry, the credit card, the student loan, the medical bill, the money owed to a family member, the car payment, all of it, written down in one place with the exact balance, the interest rate, and the minimum payment, not approximately, exactly. This exercise is uncomfortable for most people. Seeing the total in black and white can feel overwhelming in a way that the vague fog never did. But here's what Scripture understands that avoidance never will. You cannot fight an enemy you refuse to see. The fog isn't protecting you, it's keeping you stuck. Clarity is the first act of stewardship, and stewardship is what God is calling you to. Here's what also happens when you face the full number. It stops growing in your imagination. Debt that's avoided tends to feel larger than it actually is, because fear always exaggerates what it can't see clearly. When you write it down, all of it, it becomes something finite, something with edges, and something with edges is something you can actually work against. There's also a spiritual dimension to this honesty that most people miss. Carrying debt in silence, never naming it, never facing it, never bringing it into the light, creates a kind of shame that compounds alongside the interest. And shame is one of the enemy's most effective tools for keeping people paralyzed. John 8:32 says, "The truth sets you free." That's a theological promise, but it works in your finances too. The moment you name what you owe, out loud, on paper, in full, the shame loses its grip. You're no longer hiding from a number, you're facing a problem. And a problem you can face is a problem you can solve. If you want to start today, before anything else, open every account, pull every statement, and write the real number down, all of it, in one place. That list is the foundation everything else builds on, and without it, every other step is just guessing. But once you have the list, the next step surprises most people because it's not about the largest debt, it's about something much smaller. Most people assume the financially smart move is to attack the debt with the highest interest rate first, and mathematically that makes sense on paper. But Scripture doesn't just speak to mathematics, it speaks to the human heart. And the human heart needs momentum before it needs optimization. Proverbs 13:12 says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life." That verse has a direct financial application. When debt payoff feels endless and distant, people quit. But when they experience a win, even a small one, something changes in them. The belief that freedom is actually possible becomes real, not just theoretical. This is why the most effective debt elimination strategy isn't the one that saves the most in interest, it's the one that keeps you going long enough to finish. Pay the minimums on every debt, then take every available dollar, every extra payment, every small windfall, every sacrifice, and throw it at the smallest balance first. When that one clears, roll everything you were paying on it to the next smallest, and so on. The first debt to clear might feel almost insignificant. Maybe it's a $300 medical bill or a small store card with a low balance. But the moment that balance hits zero, something shifts. You stop being someone who is only ever making payments and start being someone who is eliminating debt. That identity shift is more powerful than any interest rate calculation. The Bible repeatedly shows God working through small beginnings that compound over time. A mustard seed, 5 loaves, a widow's 2 coins.
The same principle applies here. You don't need a dramatic gesture to start. You need one small, complete win, and then the next one, and then the next one. Here's where most people stall, though, and it's not because of the math, it's because of what we're about to cover in step 3. Here is a mistake almost everyone makes when trying to get out of debt. They focus entirely on paying it down while continuing to add to it. It's the equivalent of trying to empty a bathtub with the faucet still running. The payments go out, but new charges keep coming in, and the balance never meaningfully moves. Proverbs 22:3 says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." The danger here is clear. Continuing to use credit while trying to eliminate it is not a neutral act. Every new charge on a card you're trying to pay off is a step backwards dressed up as a normal expense. This step requires a specific decision. Identify every source of new debt in your life and stop it. This might mean cutting a card, not just putting it away, but removing its availability entirely. It might mean canceling subscriptions charged to credit. It might mean having an honest conversation with yourself about what you're still financing that you shouldn't be. A new purchase on credit during debt payoff isn't just a financial setback. It's a signal that the heart hasn't fully committed to the process yet. This is also where contentment from 1 Timothy 6:6 becomes a practical tool, not just a spiritual concept. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Contentment is what makes it possible to stop the bleeding, to look at something you want and decide that freedom is worth more than that purchase right now. Without contentment, every strategy eventually fails, because a dissatisfied heart always finds a way to spend what discipline was trying to save. And here's something worth sitting with. The things most people go into debt to purchase rarely deliver what they promised. The upgraded phone, the dining out habit, the vacation on credit. In the moment, they feel like relief or reward. 6 months later, they're just a line item on the list you made in step 1, still collecting interest, the feeling they produced long gone. Scripture's call to contentment isn't a call to deprivation. It's a call to stop trading long-term freedom for short-term feelings that don't last. That trade is never worth it. And once you've experienced even a small taste of financial freedom, you'll wonder how you ever thought it was. Practically, this means the season of debt elimination is a season of intentional simplicity. Not forever, just for now. The sacrifice is temporary. The freedom is permanent. Which brings us to a step most people in debt skip entirely, and it's the one that changes the spiritual dimension of everything. This is the step that feels the most counterintuitive. When you're in debt, the instinct is to stop giving entirely, to redirect every available dollar toward the balances until they're gone, and then resume generosity from a position of strength. That logic makes sense on a spreadsheet, but Scripture tells a different story.
Malachi 3:10 remains one of the only places in the Bible where God invites his people to test him. Bring the tithe first and watch what he does. This invitation wasn't extended only to people in comfortable financial positions. It was extended to a people who were struggling, who were robbing God, as the text says, precisely because they felt they couldn't afford to give. The widow of Zarephath in 1 Kings 17 gave her last meal to Elijah in the middle of a famine. She was not in a position of abundance. She gave from scarcity, and that act of trust was exactly when provision followed, not before, not after she was comfortable, in the moment of sacrifice. This doesn't mean giving recklessly or giving in ways that prevent you from making necessary debt payments. It means keeping giving as a non-negotiable first act, even in a scaled-down form if needed, because giving is not just a financial decision, it's a declaration of trust. It says, I believe God's economy works differently than mine, and I'm willing to act on that belief even when the numbers are tight. And practically, something happens to a person who keeps giving while eliminating debt. The scarcity mindset that debt tends to produce, the grip, the hoarding, the fear, starts to loosen. Generosity during a hard season is one of the most powerful ways to keep your heart free, even while your balance sheet is still catching up. Stay with me, because step 5 is where most debt payoff plans fall apart, and it's not for the reason you'd expect. Here is what happens to almost everyone who tries to eliminate debt with everything they have, throwing every spare dollar at the balances. An unexpected expense shows up. The car needs a repair, a medical bill arrives, an appliance breaks, and because there's no buffer, the only available option is The credit card. Months of progress get wiped out in one emergency, and the discouragement that follows is often enough to make people give up entirely. Joseph's principle from Genesis 41 applies even in debt elimination. Before the aggressive payoff begins, a small storehouse needs to exist. Not a full emergency fund, but enough to absorb a minor shock without reaching for credit. $1,000, maybe two, enough to handle the flat tire, the urgent copay, the unexpected bill that doesn't wait for a convenient time. This buffer doesn't delay the debt payoff significantly, but it prevents the one setback that derails everything. It's the difference between a speed bump and a wall. With a small buffer in place, an unexpected expense is an inconvenience. You use the buffer, replenish it, and continue. Without it, that same expense sends you back to step one. Proverbs 21:5 says, "Good planning leads to prosperity." Planning for emergencies before they happen is not a lack of faith. It's exactly the kind of wisdom Scripture has been commending since Joseph built storehouses during abundance so Egypt could survive during famine. Your buffer is your storehouse, small but real, and it protects everything you're building. The next step is one nobody talks about, but it's often the real reason people go back into debt after they get out. Getting out of debt without understanding how you got in is like treating a symptom without addressing the cause. The balance clears, and within a few years, it's back. Different cards, different amounts, same pattern. This cycle is more common than most people admit, and Scripture speaks directly to why it happens. Proverbs 26:11 says, "As a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly." That's a blunt image, but it's describing a real human tendency. Without understanding the specific behavior or belief that generated the debt, the cleared balance simply creates space for the pattern to repeat. Debt almost always has an origin story. For some people, it's lifestyle inflation, spending rising to meet every income increase, never creating margin. For others, it's emotional spending, using purchases to manage feelings of stress, boredom, inadequacy, or reward. For others, it's a lack of system, not a lack of income, but a lack of intentionality, so money disappears without direction and credit fills the gaps. For others, it's a deeper belief about money, that it's meant to be spent, that saving is for people with more, that debt is just how life works. Identifying your specific pattern requires honest reflection, the kind that's uncomfortable but necessary. What were the circumstances around the largest debts? What were you feeling when you made the purchases? Was there a point where you knew you were going in the wrong direction but continued anyway? What belief about money was driving the decision? This reflection isn't about guilt, it's about data. And the data tells you what needs to change in your thinking and your habits, not just in your balance, so that when the debt is gone, a different pattern takes its place. Which leads directly to the final step, the one that makes sure you never go back into debt. This is where debt elimination becomes permanent. Not just a season you survived, but a chapter that closed because the life on the other side is structured differently, and that different structure makes debt not just unnecessary, but unappealing. Proverbs 21:20 says, "The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down." The wise have margin, space between what they earn and what they spend, consistently maintained on purpose. The fool consumes everything available and has nothing left when something unexpected arrives. Debt is almost always what fills the gap that margin was supposed to occupy. Building the life that makes debt unnecessary means three things working together permanently. First, a giving habit that's non-negotiable, because giving first keeps your heart from being owned by money. Second, a savings system that's automatic. Named accounts, clear purposes, money moved before it can be spent on something else. Third, a spending plan that's honest, not a punishment, but a decision made in advance about where every dollar goes, so that no dollar goes somewhere by default. These three together create what the rest of Scripture calls stewardship. And stewardship is the state of managing what God has given you in a way that reflects trust in Him, not just intellectually, but practically, in the daily decisions about money that nobody else sees. And here's the part that makes this step truly permanent. What you build in your own household doesn't stay there. Proverbs 13:22 says, "A good person leaves an inheritance for their grandchildren." The inheritance isn't only money, It's pattern. It's the model your children watch growing up. A household that eliminated debt on purpose, that gave first, that saved consistently, that spent with intention, that household teaches its children something that no classroom ever will. And those children carry it into their own marriages, their own finances, their own decisions. Breaking the debt cycle in your generation doesn't just free you, it changes the trajectory of every generation that comes after you. That's not a small thing. That's one of the most significant acts of stewardship you will ever make. Romans 13:8 says, "Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another." That's the picture Scripture points toward. A financial life where the only thing owed is generosity, where margin exists, where the unexpected is prepared for, where the past pattern has been replaced by a new one, where debt isn't a cycle you keep returning to, but a chapter that genuinely closed. That's not a fantasy. It's what obedience, sustained over time, actually produces. And it starts with step one, the list, the full truth, the real number, today.